It is astonishing how often we are told that we live in a crisis. A housing crisis, a climate crisis, an immigration crisis, a health crisis, an education crisis, a cost of living crisis, a labor crisis, and so on and on and on without end, as if modern society has decided that permanent emergency is the only workable operating state. Crises have become not merely a feature of public discourse, but a universal alibi. The catch-all excuse for every corner cut, every derogation from standards, every cheap material, every taller tower, and every box-shaped building no one wants willingly to inhabit or even to walk past. Hello Masters and welcome to the Guild. While some crises are genuine and unavoidable, many are amplified, manipulated, or even induced, providing cover for practices that would otherwise have been rejected by society. The message from the developed world has grown increasingly blunt. We can't afford quality anymore. Modern society can't distinguish anymore what is good and what is bad, tasteful from crude, educated from merely ideological. And here lies the uncomfortable truth. The word crisis has become the rhetorical lubricant that enables compromises, shortcuts, and low-quality designs to become the normal way of working. The modernist illusion that technology will allow everyone to have access to better products has left the market for cheap substitutes from the standards they claim to replicate. A problem that will only worsen as AI-generated content pushes mass-produced mediocrity further. But before we carry on, please like the video if you enjoy these topics, add comments sharing your opinion and suggestion for the channel, and don't forget to subscribe. This helps the channel tremendously. Thank you, Masters. Historically, there was a direct relationship between the governed people and the location of power. Decision makers lived among the people they governed. They shopped at the same high street, visited the same festival, used the same barbers. Today they operate not simply at a social distance, but at a geographical distance, insulated from consequence, while presenting themselves as enlightened managers who always know best, even as the bill for their decisions is systematically pushed downwards. Visiting modern areas in Europe, but I could really say anywhere, clearly shows the poor results of the modernism. Demolition of our good heritage, ever taller buildings cramping the skyline, hostile spaces where even trees can't grow, all top-down imposed on existing communities which are expected to endure the disruption, the displacement and the cultural loss. In London where I live, this phenomenon is on steroids. Human life is technically accommodated, but increasingly never respected. The industry's favorite mantra,
"We need to build fast,"
serves primarily as a justification for eliminating details and care, reducing human life to one-dimensional metrics that treat people's homes as units in a spreadsheet. A complete lack of engagement, not in the sense of meaningless public events that we do, but with the humanity of the locals. And yet we know that speed in architecture almost never produces beauty. Though serendipitously, when it does, even things meant for a single event can last for centuries. Historically, crises refer to plagues, fires, or sieges. Today, it often means that a developer needs public grants or more and more units to satisfy the investors and quarterly reports. Crisis, in other words, has become an instrument of power, and public bodies are repeatedly complicit, sometimes through incompetence and sometimes through corruption, facilitating private gain while the public receives tokenistic gesture, a slide in a park or a lonely shrub on a roundabout. By continually reproducing the same low-quality model while controlling the supply of units, the industry has effectively removed people's choices, signing the death of democratic agency. People can do nothing but accept whatever is offered. Modernism managed to become totalitarian, creating an ecosystem of universities, journalists, awards, planners, panels, and institutions which functions largely as a self-feeding closed system, a real lobby, where a diverse approach and attitude are not just excluded but ostracized. There is one dominant model, there is one orthodoxy, a well-established status quo, protected not for its cultural merit, but because it maximizes revenues, minimizes risks, and works with products rather than with crafts. From my perspective, profit is not a problem. The problem is the conversion of the built environment where we all live into a short-term financial instrument. That human lives have become a means to an end. Developers' interest is of course in minimizing construction costs, but completely ignoring the benefits that a little less minimal expenditure could give to create something more enduring and will reduce operational costs. This because they will not be affected by them, as these costs will be passed on to future residents. A building that lasts 50 years instead of 200 is preferable to those who profit from the cycle of development, demolition, and redevelopment, as well as to those politicians just focusing on the GDP numbers. The only losers are the public, who end up living in disposable neighborhoods, and nature, whose resources are sadly wasted for something not worth it. If people lose the ability to distinguish good art from bad, or true knowledge from ideological fashion, craft from cheap, then first human values become irrelevant, and then humans too, leaving consumption as the only remaining civic duty. All modern architecture is designed as a product, instead of as a cultural expression, and therefore it carries its own planned obsolescence within itself. A typical residential British block lasts in fact between 30 and 60 years, whereas a Georgian townhouse has survived centuries of economic cycles and still offers today a far more desirable home. Modernism promised functional product, yet most fail even on functional grounds. Instead of considering the world in its complex, multivariable reality, modernists choose a flat and one-dimensional parameter to address, while ignoring the human knowledge and biology entirely. After all, if you build a product that only addresses one function, as soon as that function is superseded, the product itself is superseded, and you can go back into the development cycle. Instead, as Sir Scruton used to say, if you build beautifully, humans will find for that building other uses, and that building will find many different lives. As discussed in another video, one of the key drivers of modern ugliness is of course the collapse of architectural education. Students are encouraged to chase trends, to remove their biases, and express their individuality, as if they are already formed, rather than spending the time acquiring the accumulated knowledge of their civilization. They always start from zero, and ignoring the fact that we all are dwarves on the shoulders of giants. While a handful of exceptions exists, schools or studios that still emphasize craft and historical knowledge, the dominant trend across every continent reduces the profession to serving clients with narratives, rather than producing buildings and cities of lasting quality. The professional of an architect, I think, has become more similar to that of a lawyer rather than a creative endeavor. The architect's job has become to convince you what to think of their work. The result is therefore predictable. Modernist architects who believe themselves to be original produce interchangeable soulless buildings that look depressing, feel unhuman, and take away from their context rather than contribute to it. Architects demand freedom for their work. You can't possibly ask them to restrain their creativity, but my message is that they are actually glorifying the chains that modernism has put them on. Modernism, a century-old ideology, is asking us to ignore the good that came through thousands of years of evolution, and that still forms part of our unique identity, and instead to praise models that have indeed produced very little good, which is also baffling if you consider the sheer amount of buildings built in the past 100 years. Of course, modernists will insist that no alternative exists, and that theirs is the only way. After all, the first act of a jailer is always to destroy the hope of the prisoner. But the good news is that none of this is inevitable. We can reclaim true freedom, but to do this, as per the recovery programs for addiction, we must first acknowledge we have a problem. This initial and most crucial step will require you significant courage. Our subconscious will have a denial process trying to avoid this painful reality and defend our beliefs and all the time and efforts we invested. But soon you will discover that you can now have access to a much larger universe of true and good knowledge, and that there is so much that you don't know. Things that you can actually learn. This will be the beginning of your detox. Relearning history from a different lens, which will bring you to discover architects and artists that we were completely oblivious to. Just a few months ago, I was part of the InPulp World Congress here in London, where I could witness myself the whole outstanding work that is happening all over the world. Traditional cities were built through craft, judgment, and proportion, ultimately responding to the natural realities of materials and human limitations. The tabula rasa and limitless resources promised by modernism were a lie. Instead of heading towards transhumanist fantasies, we must return to common sense and reproclaim our humanity as part of nature. Modern crises ask us to renounce hope and passively accept top-down decisions. The real Western crises are not a shortage of physical things, but a shortage of common sense, a knowledge beyond catchy fashions and deadly ideologies. Consider this: no pre-modern society needed the term place-making or character to make good architecture or urbanism. These qualities, in fact, emerged naturally from the human-focused design and traditional processes. Western countries now find themselves in a sad predicament. They are tightly regulated and yet producing some of the lowest quality construction in their history. This is no coincidence. The systemic destruction of classical education has hollowed out our cultural identity. The modern construction industry dislikes skills and craft, as they require dexterity, time, and attention. As if the failure of our education system were not enough, we keep destroying our built heritage. It is worth noting that Britain's most significant heritage losses were not caused by war, but by deliberate mid-20th century demolitions, which had to make space for progress. Shopping precincts and utopian town centers, now ghost towns condemned by their hollow cultural relevance. And yet people instinctively recognize beauty. They travel thousands of miles to visit historic quarters, which they love even when plaster cracks and pavements are uneven. Because there they recognize humanity and they can spiritually connect, even when they are not part of the same culture. People vote with their feet, they say, and if that's true, the results are unambiguous. Wherever historic fabric survives or nature dominates, people flock to it. There is a passage in Calvino's book that says that arriving at each new city, the traveler finds again a past of his that he did not know he had. He believes that the traveler's past changes according to the route he has followed. Not the immediate past, that is, but the most remote past. Humanity as part of one long tradition, ready to be rediscovered. Furthermore, the argument that
we must build more to solve the crisis
is also a false friend. Just as adding lanes never solves traffic congestion, constructing endless units for the sake of numbers only creates more demand, while of course generating enormous returns for those who control supply. But cities do not improve by adding square meters or stacking units. Their aim should be a long-lasting human flourishing and not mere GDP growth. Cities require cultural, architectural, social, and aesthetic value. Beauty is not superfluous. It is a functional requirement for civilized life. Pre-modern societies were imperfect, as we are too, yet they understood lineage, and they built with responsibility towards their descendants. For centuries, they were custodians, not foolishly acting as the final users. In the past, we built relatively slowly, but intelligently. Materials were local, streets followed the terrain, building design followed altitude and climate, the foundations responded to geology, and structure responded to gravity rather than challenging it. Things were built to last. Today we use technology to override common sense, constructing glass towers in hot climates and flat roofs in snowy regions. Just because we can do something doesn't mean we should. What the building industry truly needs is not yet another new green material they can sell you, another innovation that, yes, this time will solve all our problems, or another accreditation to absolve our assigned sins, the various BREEAM, LEED, B Corp, and so on. What it needs is true accountability, a care for durability, and an alignment with human and natural life. The industry and academia want you to believe that there is no alternative, that this is progress, that this is the only way acceptable. But I'm telling you, this is false, and many people are becoming aware of it. This is of course no easy task, but the path to what is right is never easy. Our ancestors managed to build beauty even amid war, plague, and political instability. Because when we build truthfully and with goodness, beauty naturally emerges. And this is true in the highest forms of classical architecture as well as in the vernacular one. Real or induced crises have never justified ugliness. It is precisely under pressure that society should build for dignity, stability, meaning, and human life. See you in the next episode.